He walked into the swamp and was never seen again. Where are you watching this from? Let us know in the comments. Your city might be closer to this mystery than you think. And if you love stories that grip you like a cold hand in the dark, subscribe now and help us reach our goal of 1,000 likes. Subscribing helps us bring you more haunting mysteries you won't find anywhere else. The Florida Everglades are a place of contrast. Gorgeous sunrises reflect on glassy water, birds glide across endless skies, and cypress trees twist out of black water like guardians of a forgotten world. But beneath that beauty lies something ancient, something untamed, and something that on August 3rd, 2007 may have swallowed a child whole. That morning, the Tanners packed up for a weekend away from their routine lives in Fort Lauderdale. It was a last-minute idea, a spontaneous camping trip meant to reconnect as a family. Matthew Tanner, just 11 years old, was thrilled. He had begged his parents for weeks to go somewhere wild. The Everglades seemed perfect. They arrived at a primitive campground near Big Cypress Preserve, a flat, humid stretch of wilderness that felt completely cut off from the modern world. No cell signal, no lights after sunset, just bugs, thick air, and the occasional distant splash. The Tanners set up camp quickly, eager to get some hiking in before the afternoon rains. Matthew was especially restless, darting between the trees and poking at the mud with a stick he'd declared his swamp sword. He was curious about everything: dragonflies, snake tracks, and the distant croaking of gators in the water. By late afternoon, a storm rolled in, sudden and violent. Heavy rain slammed the tent roof. Thunder shook the earth. Visibility dropped to just a few feet. When it finally passed, Matthew was gone. His parents assumed he'd gone to the edge of the water to look for frogs, but minutes stretched into hours, and then panic set in. The search began immediately. Rangers were called in. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers combed the area for days. They found no footprints, no torn clothes, no signs of struggle, only his stick, his swamp sword, lying on the edge of the water, half submerged in muck. It was like the Everglades had swallowed him whole. The official investigation classified Matthew as a missing person, likely drowned, but the body was never found. And locals began whispering. Stories spread about strange lights seen that night, about a woman in white standing knee-deep in the swamp, hours before the boy vanished. One old fisherman claimed he heard a boy laughing, not crying, laughing, deep in the reeds just after the storm. 15 years passed. The Tanner family moved away. The campsite was closed. And Matthew became another sad statistic, one more child gone without a trace, until last spring. In April 2022, during a conservation sweep near an alligator nesting zone, a wildlife officer noticed something odd. Nesting crocodiles had disturbed a muddy bank, revealing an old metal box wedged between roots. It was wrapped in oilskin, half-eaten by rust. Inside was a journal. The first page was signed, Matthew Tanner, age 11. The final page was dated just 3 days after he disappeared, and what it described didn't make sense. It mentioned someone or something called the Pale Man of the Water. It spoke of whispers in the night, of a place beneath the stillness, and of a choice Matthew said he wasn't ready to make yet. No one could explain how the journal got there. No one could explain how it was still intact. And no one could explain the final line, scribbled in shaky handwriting, as if written in a rush. If someone finds this, he knows you're looking now. The journal was dried carefully in a conservation lab in Tallahassee. Despite 15 years of exposure to Florida humidity and the proximity to water, most of the pages were readable. Experts were baffled by how well it had been preserved. The handwriting, youthful and messy, matched Matthew's school records. Forensics confirmed it was genuine. Page 1 was dated August 3rd, 2007, the day he disappeared. "We got here today. The trees look like monsters. I love it." It began innocently enough. The first few entries were typical of an excited, imaginative child. He described the drive down, mosquito bites, and a frog he caught near the camp. He nicknamed it Captain Bogwater. But by page 3, the tone shifted. Last night, I heard tapping, not on the tent, on the water, like someone walking on it. Authorities initially believed the journal might have been planted, but how and why remained unexplained. No footprints were found near the nest, and the box was buried deep beneath hardened swamp roots. The next few entries hinted at something unseen. There's a man I see sometimes, only in the morning fog. He has no hat, no shoes, and his eyes don't blink. There were crude drawings, stick figures of a tall, thin man standing near trees, sometimes beside the water, sometimes hovering just above it. One drawing showed him with long arms stretching toward the boy's tent. Investigators went cold. Psychologists suggested it could be a coping mechanism. A frightened child lost in the swamp might hallucinate. But the dates posed a problem. The entries continued for 3 full days after his disappearance, each one more unnerving. Mom and Dad don't hear him, but I do. He told me my name today. He doesn't like the sun. He hides behind the cypress trees. I think he's waiting for something. The final legible entry was scrawled sideways across the bottom of the page. The handwriting was rushed, almost desperate. He says if I follow, I can go home, but I don't think he means my house. The rest of the page was smudged, as if by wet fingers or tears. Authorities didn't know what to make of it. No body, no proof of foul play, and now, 15 years later, a discovery that only deepened the mystery. The press caught wind of the journal quickly. News stations ran with headlines like "Swamp Ghost Returns" and "Journal from the Beyond." Online forums erupted with theories. Some claimed the journal was proof of interdimensional beings, while others argued it was the work of a skilled hoaxer. But one theory stood out. A retired Everglades ranger named Dale Haskins reached out to the Tanner family after seeing a photo of the journal. He claimed to have encountered a similar figure in 1989 while patrolling near the same area. He was standing knee-deep in the water, arms stretched out like he was feeling the air. I called out, but he just turned and vanished into the mist. I never told anyone, until now. The Tanners were shaken. Matthew's mother, Karen, agreed to speak on camera for the first time in over a decade. "I don't know what happened to my son," she said, clutching a faded photograph, "but he was out there, and now I wonder if he's still out there, watching." Investigators reopened the case, unofficially. A new task force began scanning old search grids with updated tech. But the Everglades don't forget or forgive. The deeper they looked, the more unsettling the clues became. And then, 6 weeks later, a second item was found. A child's red backpack. Stuffed inside was a flashlight, a half-used notepad, and a Polaroid photo that made one detective drop it on sight. Because standing in the background of the photo was the man from the drawings. The Polaroid was faded, tinged yellow at the edges, but unmistakably real. It showed a boy, presumably Matthew, smiling as he held up a frog in his hand. Behind him, barely visible in the swamp haze, was a tall, thin silhouette. Zoomed in, the figure lost clarity, but its shape matched the crude sketches from the journal. Long limbs, no hat, and a disturbingly featureless face. Forensics analyzed the photo under high-resolution scanners. No signs of digital manipulation. The photo paper and chemical composition matched Polaroids manufactured between 2005 and 2008. It hadn't been planted recently. It was from the time Matthew vanished. That alone was shocking, but it was the time stamp on the back that truly chilled investigators. August 6, 2007. 3 days after the boy disappeared, which begged the question, who took the photo? The notepad found in the backpack offered more fragments, mostly sketches, some words. "He doesn't like when I draw him." One page read. Another page had just a single sentence. "There are places in the swamp that don't belong on maps." The flashlight still worked. It flickered weakly, battery corroded, but when switched on, it glowed a faint green, like it had been turned on recently. Investigators were torn. Either this was the most elaborate and chilling prank the Everglades had ever seen, or something darker was unfolding. Matthew's father, Alan Tanner, flew back to Florida to see the backpack himself. He hadn't returned to the Everglades since the week of the search. "It's his," he said immediately, voice trembling. "The straps are chewed like our dog did. I remember yelling at Matthew for leaving it on the floor." Alan broke down afterward, clutching the red fabric like it might give him answers. But the swamp remained silent. In town, news of the photo triggered a wave of paranormal interest. YouTubers and podcasters descended on the area. Locals reported drones flying over restricted areas and mysterious figures wandering near closed trails. Some claimed to see lights in the trees at night. Others heard tapping sounds on their windows. But one report stood out. A teenage couple kayaking through a quiet stretch of the swamp claimed they found an old tree carved with letters. "MT was here 2007. Carved too deep to be recent. Rangers confirmed the tree had stood in the area for over 40 years. The carving was real. But again, who carved it and when? Authorities increased patrols, fearing thrill seekers might get hurt. The Everglades aren't just spooky, they're deadly. But despite warnings, stories kept coming in. And then, something even stranger happened. A wildlife cam, set up to monitor alligator nests, captured footage of a child. At 3:14 a.m., under moonlight, a boy in a yellow raincoat walked along the edge of the water. He paused, looked directly into the camera, and smiled. The image was grainy, motion blurred, but side by side with photos of Matthew Tanner, it was an eerie match. Investigators were skeptical. Could it be a prank? A local kid in a costume? But the area was closed to the public, miles from any trail. And the timestamp, August 3rd, 2022. Exactly 15 years to the day since Matthew disappeared. The footage went viral within hours. Some said it was proof Matthew was alive, somehow. Others were convinced it was a ghost, a warning, or worse. The Tanners were divided. Karen refused to watch it. Alan played it on loop. "That's my son," he whispered. "That's his smile, but he hasn't aged." Behind the boy in the footage, something moved. A blur of white, humanoid, but flickering, as if part of the air itself. Frame by frame, it emerged from the mist, and then disappeared. Just before the camera cut to static. The footage was handed off to specialists in video forensics, including a private contractor formerly with the FBI's Digital Analysis Unit. After weeks of scrutiny, the verdict came back. The video was authentic. No sign of tampering, green screen artifacts, or layering. The light reflections on the boy's raincoat matched the angle of the moon that night. Even the ripples in the water beside him responded to his movement. Whoever or whatever appeared on that camera had been physically there, and yet no footprints were found near the location, no trace of a human presence. The camera itself had been mounted 10 feet off the ground, with no sign of disturbance or tampering. The moment went viral. Hashtags like Matthew Returns and like Everglades Ghost trended for days. But for the Tanners, it wasn't a social media story. It was a resurrection of trauma. Karen Tanner issued a statement through their lawyer, asking the public to stop trespassing and speculating. But deep down, she had questions too. She hadn't believed in anything supernatural until the footage. She couldn't bring herself to watch it, but she couldn't stop asking others to describe every second. "Did he look scared?" she asked one journalist. "Was he alone?" Meanwhile, local authorities started referring to the case as unresolved with active anomalies, a term not typically used in missing persons files. That only fueled the fire. And then someone else came forward. Her name was Ruthie Morales, a now retired elementary school teacher. In 2007, she had been hiking through the Everglades on the same weekend Matthew vanished. She never spoke up before. She assumed what she saw was her mind playing tricks. But now, after seeing the drawings from the journal, she couldn't ignore it anymore. "I saw a boy walking along the waterline," she said. "I thought he was with a group. But when I looked closer, I realized he was alone. And behind him, there was a shape in the mist. A man, but not a man. Tall, thin, like stretched skin over smoke." Her account matched the journal descriptions. She remembered the boy turning to wave. "He smiled at me, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was resigned." Ruthie gave them a location, near an old ranger tower decommissioned decades ago. A new search party was dispatched. The area was dense, overgrown, and hadn't been traversed in years. That's when they found it. A circle of stones partially sunken into the mud, forming a perfect ring about 6 feet wide. In the center, an upright stick carved with the initials MT. Around the base were trinkets, a broken toy truck, a frog carved from wood, a pair of small shoes, water-damaged but intact. Matthew's size. It looked like some kind of offering ground, or a place where someone had tried to remember him. But the question remained, who placed these items there, and why had no one found them in the initial searches? Rangers checked historical maps. The area had been searched back in 2007, but the clearing hadn't been there. Satellite data confirmed the ground shifted in 2012 after a flood, which may have opened up the ring. It had been buried all this time. More importantly, the stick with the initials showed recent wear. Someone had touched it within the last 6 months. And deep in the mud beside the shoes, searchers found something small and metallic. It was a compass. Rusted, broken. The back engraved with the words, "To Matt, so you always find your way. Love, Dad." It was a gift Alan had given his son for his 10th birthday. He'd assumed it was lost forever. When they handed it to him, Alan went silent, then said one word, "He's still here." Behind them in the cypress grove something moved. A whisper carried on the wind. 3 syllables stretched thin like smoke through the trees. "He's watching again." The whisper didn't register on the ranger's audio logs. The body cams worn by 2 officers that day picked up wind, bird calls, distant gator groans, but not the voice. And yet 3 people swore they heard it clearly. "He's watching again." The voice wasn't threatening. It was soft, almost mournful, but it sent a chill through every person who heard it. Alan Tanner stood completely still, clutching the compass, staring into the trees. His eyes scanned the distance, like he expected to see his son step out from behind the brush. But the only thing visible was the still water between the trunks, dark, glassy and unbroken. The circle of stones was catalogued and marked for forensic review. The items were collected and preserved, including the tiny wooden frog. A whittled figure, carved crudely but with care. Experts believed it was made by a child, possibly with a pocket knife. The problem: Matthew Tanner's pocket knife had never been recovered. It was red, with his name etched in the handle. A birthday gift from his grandfather. Its disappearance was part of the original case file. Now, with the frog, that knife became important again. Karen Tanner reviewed the photo of the carving. Her hands trembled. "Matthew used to name all his frogs," she whispered. "That one's supposed to be Captain Bogwater. He drew him in the journal." It was another connection, another impossible thread tying the present to the past. But the discovery had unintended consequences. The moment news of the stone circle leaked, things changed. Paranormal investigators arrived en masse. Theories ranged from portals to spiritual time slips. A fringe group camped out near the Ranger Tower and claimed the Everglades were a veil point between realities. It didn't help that one of them disappeared for 3 days, then reappeared barefoot, mumbling about the man in the water who told him to leave. Law enforcement began pushing back. Areas were barricaded, arrests were made. But the more they tried to silence the noise, the louder the story grew. Podcasts ran multi-part exposés, true crime forums dissected every journal page, every drawing, and then came the tape. An anonymous package arrived at the local sheriff's office. No return address. Inside was a mini DV cassette and a printed note. "He let me go. You should listen." The tape was dated August 2007. It was heavily degraded, static-ridden, but it showed something. A boy's voice, breathing hard. Then a dim flashlight beam bouncing over swamp roots. The camera swung wildly, whispers, not words, just sounds, like wind being shaped into language. Then silence. Then water. The boy gasped. "He's right there. He's not a man. His face." Static. A few frames of a pale shape, towering, unclear. Then nothing. The rest of the tape was blank. Technicians attempted to enhance it. They isolated the voice, compared it to childhood clips of Matthew Tanner. The match probability came back at 87%. Not definitive, but deeply disturbing. The voice on the tape, panicked, out of breath, was likely Matthew, and if the tape was real, it meant someone had recorded footage of the moment everything changed. Someone had been with him, maybe following him, maybe helping, or maybe worse. Alan listened to the audio 20 times. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He only said he was terrified, but he was still trying to get away. That night, for the first time in over a decade, Alan returned alone to the Everglades. He stood at the edge of the water where the compass had been found. In the darkness, he whispered into the trees, "Matthew, I'm here." A splash echoed in the distance. Not an alligator, not a bird. A slow, deliberate step in water too shallow for anything large. Then came the voice again, only this time clearer. He's listening too. Alan Tanner didn't sleep that night. He sat in his truck until sunrise, staring into the tree line, waiting for something to return his call. But the swamp had gone silent again. No voice, no splash, just the buzzing of insects and the distant crackle of heat lightning. When he returned to town, he didn't speak much. He looked like someone who'd come close to something, too close, and wasn't sure if he was meant to survive it. Investigators didn't believe he actually heard anything. The official report cited auditory pareidolia exacerbated by emotional trauma. But Alan didn't care. He knew what he heard, and he wasn't the only one. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 separate hikers reported hearing voices in the same area. Always at dusk, always when they were alone. It sounded like a child, one said, like someone calling out, but not quite asking for help. More like luring. Rangers increased patrols. Cameras were installed in the trees. Motion sensors placed near the old ranger tower, but footage kept coming back clean, empty, until one night a camera snapped 3 frames, less than a second apart, of a boy's silhouette standing at the waterline. In frame 1, he faced the camera. In frame 2, he turned. In frame 3, he was gone. No footprints, no splash, just reeds swaying as if something had moved through them. It was the 3rd time since the journal was found that a boy matching Matthew's description appeared near the same area, and always under the same conditions. Mist, low light, no witnesses nearby. This time they brought in thermal drones. The scans picked up heat signatures, one large humanoid form standing motionless in the water for over 20 minutes. It didn't move like a person, no shifting weight, no swaying. Just still, watching. When rangers approached on foot, the signal vanished, and all they found was a patch of water, slightly warmer than the rest, like something had just been there. That week, Karen Tanner finally watched the original trail cam video, the one where the boy smiled at the camera. She'd avoided it until now, but something inside her changed. "I had a dream," she told a reporter. "Matthew was holding my hand in a hallway made of trees. He said, 'Don't be sad, Mom. I'm just on the other side.'" The footage broke her. The smile was his. She recognized the way he shifted his weight, the way he blinked. But there was something else, something in his eyes. Not fear, not sadness, something older, like he had seen too much. She gave permission to reopen the case officially. A federal task force was formed, citing unusual developments in a historic missing child case with unexplained evidence. Files were pulled from deep storage, witnesses re-interviewed, and that's when something was discovered, something small but chilling. A page from the original 2007 Ranger logs, previously dismissed, mentioned a report from two tourists. They claimed to have seen a boy playing near the water with a man who had no face. The ranger wrote it off as a joke or a misunderstanding. No follow-up was made. But now the team tracked those tourists down. They were elderly, living in upstate New York. They remembered everything. The man was strange, the husband said. His skin looked wrong, pale, like candle wax. And he just stood there, didn't blink. The boy looked at us like he wanted to say something, but the man put a hand on his shoulder. They left immediately. They never forgot. And they never knew the boy they saw had gone missing hours later. Investigators asked why they never came forward. The answer was simple. "We didn't want to get involved," the woman said. "But sometimes I still hear his voice when I dream." That night, back at the swamp, the motion sensors triggered again. This time not one figure, but two, a child, and beside him, tall and still, a figure the cameras couldn't quite resolve. Too pale, too thin, and its face completely blank. By now, the case had reached a boiling point. What began as the rediscovery of a journal had spiraled into a storm of evidence, speculation and dread. The presence of two figures on the most recent thermal scan, one matching Matthew's small stature, the other far larger and unidentifiable, was enough to trigger federal escalation. The FBI took over jurisdiction within 48 hours. But behind the scenes, they weren't just reviewing old files. They were contacting specialists, not criminologists, not wildlife experts, folklorists, people who studied patterns, unspoken legends passed down through generations. One name kept surfacing, the Pale Man of the Water. Dozens of stories, scattered across decades, described a similar figure haunting the outer edges of civilization, particularly in swamps, wetlands, or places where water met forest. He never harmed directly. He watched, lured, took only those who were already drifting away, as one account put it. In most stories, the people he took were never found, but some claimed they returned, changed, different, older on the inside, though not always in years, and some, only some, left behind something, a journal, a voice on tape, or a photograph just blurry enough to cast doubt. Karen Tanner sat with one of the folklorists, Dr. Elise Grammer, a researcher out of Georgia who had compiled over 70 such cases. "This is the first time I've seen it all come together," Elise said. "A journal, a witness, a photograph. Usually we only get fragments." Karen asked the question no one else had the courage to voice. "Do you think he's dead?" Elise didn't answer right away. She stared at the still frame of the boy from the video, then said quietly, "I think he's not where we are." Alan Tanner, meanwhile, had returned to the swamp every day. He walked the trails near the ranger tower, never going far, just waiting, listening. He brought the compass. The first time, it spun wildly for 5 minutes before settling. The second time, it refused to move at all. The third time, it pointed due east and stayed locked, even when he turned. It wasn't until the fourth visit that something else happened. He brought an old recorder, hoping to capture ambient noise. But when he reviewed the tape later that night, at exactly 2:37 a.m., a voice whispered, "Not yet, he's almost ready." The voice wasn't Alan's, and it wasn't Matthew's. It was deeper, slower, like something unused to speaking. Authorities were reluctant to make the tape public, fearing it would attract more people to the area. But leaks happened anyway. Reddit exploded with theories. Some claimed this was proof of an interdimensional rift. Others said it was evidence of a spiritual possession. A few thought it was viral marketing for a horror film, but none of them had to sit with the reality. The Tanners did, and so did Ranger Louise Harwell. She had worked the original search in 2007. She was only 25 then. Now graying and near retirement, she returned to the site where Matthew vanished, alone. She brought a tape recorder and a map, left both by the water. The next morning, only the map remained. The recorder was gone. 5 days later, it appeared on her front porch. Clean, undamaged. It had been wiped, except for one new recording. It lasted 21 seconds. First, silence. Then soft footsteps in water. Then, singing. A child's voice. Row, row, row your boat. But the last line wasn't right. Instead of gently down the stream, the boy sang, Follow where the still things dream. Louise quit the force that night, left no note, packed up, and disappeared. No one has seen her since. But the morning after she vanished, someone found something nailed to the old Ranger Tower door. A drawing, stick figures, a tall man, a small boy, and in block letters beneath them, Almost home. The drawing pinned to the Ranger Tower sent investigators into a frenzy. Forensics revealed no fingerprints, no fibers, no trace DNA, just black ink on sun-bleached notebook paper. The handwriting was eerily close to Matthew's journal entries, and yet more refined, older, more deliberate. The paper itself, manufactured in 2006, a near-perfect match with Matthew's original journal stock. But it wasn't just the image of the stick figures that caught attention. It was what was drawn on the back. A map. Sketched in rough strokes, it depicted a portion of the Everglades, but not as any ranger or cartographer had ever seen it. It showed water trails long dried up, land masses that hadn't existed since before the floods of 2012, and in the center, a symbol. A spiral carved into the outline of a mangrove cluster, circled 3 times with the word Gate scrawled beneath it. Rangers cross-referenced the location with existing maps. The spot wasn't accessible by foot, boat, or air. It was a no-man's land of unstable terrain, shifting water lines, and dense unmapped brush. And yet, a team was assembled. 6 specialists, 2 federal agents, a cryptographer, 1 drone operator, and Alan Tanner. Against protest, he insisted on joining. If he drew this, he said, then I'm going to where his hand was pointing. They launched at dawn. The air was thick, wet with anticipation. The drone guided them until the terrain grew too difficult. Then they went in on foot. It took 3 hours. At times they used machetes to cut through mangroves. At others they moved in near silence, guided only by the sound of their own breath. And then they found it. A natural clearing in the middle of the swamp, unnaturally round, as if shaped, not grown. In the center, a patch of water still and dark as oil. Surrounding it, carvings in the bark of nearby trees, circles, eyes. One tree bore the word stay, another watch. No animals moved, no insects buzzed. Even the air felt wrong, heavy and flat like the sound had been sucked away. The team set up thermal scanners, cameras, sample kits, but the data was erratic. Electronics drained rapidly. Batteries died within minutes. Compass needles spun. The only equipment that remained functional was analog. Pencils, paper, and Alan's old compass, the one given to Matthew. He held it in the center of the clearing. For the first time since he'd recovered it, it pointed north and stayed there. Alan stepped to the edge of the dark pool. He didn't speak. He only knelt and placed the drawing at the water's edge. "If you're here," he whispered, "we're not leaving without you." And then the water rippled, not from rain, not from wind, a single concentric pulse radiating outward, then still. Alan didn't move. The others readied equipment, but nothing would turn on. Only the sound of his voice remained. "We came for answers. We came for you." That night they camped nearby, rotating watch in pairs. But something happened between 3 and 4 a.m. The log shows all members accounted for, but the video recovered the next day tells a different story. Footage from one analog camcorder, old, tape-based, shows Alan sitting by the water alone. He stands, steps forward, reaches out, and then static. When the group awoke, Alan Tanner was gone. No footprints, no struggle. Just the compass, placed carefully on top of the drawing he had brought. In his tent, he left a single page torn from a journal. One sentence: "He's not alone here." Search parties combed the swamp for days. Nothing. No sign of Alan, no sign of Matthew. But the clearing remained, and so did the silence. The map, now sealed in a federal archive. But copies leaked. People began arriving again, and some didn't leave. They just stopped being seen. Because there are places in the world that don't like being found. And sometimes, when you do find them, they find you back. 3 weeks after Alan Tanner vanished in the heart of the Everglades, a wildlife monitoring tower 20 miles east received a transmission. It came through an old emergency channel, one that hadn't been active since 2009. The signal was weak, riddled with static, but clear enough to be transcribed. It lasted 17 seconds. The voice, unmistakably Alan Tanner. "If anyone hears this, I found something. It's not what we thought. He's not keeping him. He's showing him. I don't know what to do. Don't come looking. Please, don't." The message ended in distortion. Sound engineers tried to recover more, but the original frequency degraded as quickly as it appeared. The broadcast had come from an area with no working towers, no power sources, and no known repeaters. Yet the origin was triangulated within 2 miles of the spiral pool clearing. Alan's voice had pierced the silence. Briefly, the news shattered Karen. She listened to the recording once, collapsed, and was hospitalized the same day. But before her breakdown, she said something strange to investigators. "He's wrong," she muttered. "I've seen it too now. It's not showing, it's choosing." Officials didn't know what she meant. They assumed it was the trauma talking, but one agent noted in her report, Mrs. Tanner's pupils dilated significantly when she said this. Like she wasn't speaking from memory, but reaction. Karen later denied ever saying those words. Her mental state deteriorated quickly after that. She stopped eating, spoke to no one, and late one night she escaped the facility, slipped past orderlies, left a note on her bed. "Matthew knows the way now. I can follow." She was last seen driving west, toward the Everglades. Her car was found abandoned at the same campground they visited in 2007. Inside was a new drawing, a boy holding a lantern, a path lined with water, and behind him, 3 tall figures, barely sketched in the mist. The public didn't hear about this. Authorities feared copycats or mass hysteria, but whispers spread, and more strange reports followed. Hikers finding carvings in trees that hadn't been there hours before, old cassette tapes appearing on doorsteps, playing children's voices singing lullabies out of tune. Drones flying over restricted zones, losing all GPS function, only to return with footage of fog and shapes that couldn't be explained. And then came the hiker. A 19-year-old college student from Tampa went missing while trying to reach the spiral pool. He had been documenting his journey online, posting live updates. His final post read, "Made it past the ridge. The water's still. Feels wrong. Something's humming beneath the ground." Authorities found his phone 6 days later, placed carefully on a tree stump with the flashlight still on. The footage recorded overnight was corrupted, except for one clip. 4 seconds. It showed a figure emerging from the trees. Not the boy. Taller. arms too long, head tilted unnaturally to the side, and then it looked directly at the camera. Eyes, if they were eyes, glowed faintly, and then it disappeared. The student was never found, but something else was. Near where the phone had been left, rangers discovered a small notebook wrapped in cloth. Inside, scribbled in erratic handwriting, were phrases that made little sense. The door breathes. Wet air doesn't mean rain. He walked into me. Now I see it too. And the last page was signed, shakily, Matthew Tanner. The handwriting didn't match his childhood script. It was older, like someone who hadn't written in years. The ink was fresh, the notebook paper, manufactured in 2021. But Matthew disappeared in 2007, which meant someone had written that recently, someone who hadn't aged in ways the world understands. Now investigators face an impossible question. If Matthew Tanner is alive, what has he become? By now, Matthew Tanner's case had spiraled far beyond any known category of disappearance. What had started as a missing persons investigation had evolved into something that federal agents struggled to define, let alone control. Internally, the case had been moved to a special classification unit, known simply as Division 16. Their files were sealed. Access required multiple levels of clearance. And even then, much of the content was heavily redacted. But one internal memo leaked. Subject MT appears to be alive but altered. Current hypothesis: non-linear aging, cognitive distortion, unknown exposure, possible interaction with liminal phenomenon, containment not advised, observation only. The public never saw those words, but locals near the Everglades felt the shift. Tourists stopped coming, guides closed shop, and those who stayed told stories they used to whisper, openly. Stories of the eyes in the trees. At first, they were considered swamp myths, old tales meant to scare newcomers, but over the past year, those eyes had returned. Pale, glowing orbs seen deep in the cypress at night, always high off the ground, always watching. Hunters reported seeing movement that defied logic, something tall and silent, moving parallel to them, just beyond flashlight reach. Game trail cameras showed animals freezing in place, staring into nothing before bolting. One photo captured a deer mid-sprint, its eyes wide with terror. In the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was a hand, long, thin fingers stretching from behind a tree trunk. No body, just the hand. Theories multiplied. Fringe scientists claimed the Everglades had become a thin spot, a tear between dimensions. Paranormal experts spoke of entities that only appeared when certain emotional thresholds were met. Grief, loss, longing. But others believed something darker, that Matthew Tanner had become a kind of vessel, chosen or trapped by whatever force lived in that swamp. And now it was using him to call others, to bring them to the spiral, to the pool, to the place where maps no longer worked. And then came the footage from drone pilot Jacob Sykes. Jacob wasn't part of any official investigation, just a 33-year-old with a YouTube channel and a knack for breaking into closed zones. He flew his drone low over the swamp, aiming to catch sunrise mist. What he captured instead shook him to the core. In the footage, the drone hovered above the spiral clearing. The pool was visible, calm and black. Then, movement. A figure stepped into the clearing. A child, wearing a yellow raincoat. The drone zoomed in. The boy looked up, smiled, and behind him, rising from the water, was something vast. It wasn't a man. It wasn't even a shape. It was like the suggestion of a form made of mist and shadow, stretching up and out like a tower of vapor with limbs. It didn't move like flesh. It rippled like heat. But two pinpoints of light, faint but there, stared up at the drone. The footage cut out. Jacob fled the site. He deleted his channel within 48 hours, vanished from social media. Later, he was interviewed off record. He refused to show his face, but he said one thing clearly. The boy is still there, but he's not asking for help. He's warning us. The thing that watches him, it wants more, and it learns every time we look at it. In the final seconds of his footage, before the cut, audio picked up a faint sound. Slowed down, enhanced by forensic software, it was a voice. A boy's voice, whispering, "I remember you." Who he was speaking to remains unknown. But agents reviewing the file marked the timestamp with a red flag, because earlier in Matthew's journal he had written the same phrase. Page 12. Day 2, in the swamp. I saw him again. He remembers me. Whatever lives in that swamp, whatever holds the boy, it remembers everything. After the footage from Jacob Sykes leaked, Division 16 went silent. For 2 weeks, no updates, no statements, nothing. Then quietly, satellite restrictions were placed over the southeastern quadrant of the Everglades. Civilian drones stopped functioning over the region. Navigation apps rerouted flights away, and the spiral clearing was marked as environmentally unstable terrain on every public map. But beneath that cover, something was happening. A team had been assembled, covert, multidisciplinary. Not just agents, but neurologists, linguists, electromagnetic theorists, and 2 anthropologists specializing in non-Western dimensional law. Their objective wasn't to find Matthew. It was to understand what he had become. That became terrifyingly relevant when new audio surfaced. An old field recorder was found, wrapped in plastic, left anonymously on the doorstep of the ranger station closest to the clearing. Inside was a cassette, labeled simply 11th Night. The contents were nearly 3 hours long. Most of it was swamp ambience, crickets, frogs, occasional bird calls. But around the 2-hour, 12-minute mark, everything changed. The crickets stopped, the air grew still, and then, dripping, like footsteps in water, a child's voice followed. Clear, calm, almost conversational. It's not a dream. It's a room made of water, but it doesn't get you wet. It's under the pool, under the roots. It showed me how it listens. There was a pause. Then, he wears the silence like clothes. He doesn't move like us, but I can feel him moving. The voice paused again. Breathing. Then came a sentence no one could explain. He's remembering how to be a person. He's using my face to practice. Experts were divided. Some believed it was a scripted hoax. Others, especially those in Division 16, weren't so sure. The voice matched the previously analyzed clips of Matthew Tanner. But it had a rhythm, a cadence, like someone mimicking speech, or relearning how to communicate. And then came the final 2 minutes, a sound that began as humming, low, distant, rising steadily in pitch until it was just barely out of human hearing. Audio techs used spectral analysis and found strange harmonics layered within it, shaped patterns resembling whispered words. When reversed and filtered, the phrase became clear, "We remember you too." The recording was marked classified, but one copy was leaked by someone inside the investigation. It circulated through encrypted forums. Urban explorers, paranormal investigators, even military analysts began dissecting it, and the consensus was chilling. Something in the swamp had intelligence, not animal intelligence, something reflective, and it was watching back. In the midst of the chaos, another discovery. A pair of hikers found a tree near a lesser-known Everglades trail. Carved into it was a series of dates, 15 of them, each corresponding to August 3rd of every year since 2007. Beneath the dates, a question. How long do I wait? A forensic botanist confirmed the carvings were done over time, a different depth for each year. The last one, 2022, was still fresh. Whatever was doing this, whoever, had returned to the same place, the same date for 15 years, and left a mark. Agents rushed to the site. Beneath the carvings, buried under a shallow layer of mud, they found another object, a lunchbox, rusted shut. Inside, a water-damaged photo of Matthew with his parents, a moldy granola bar, and a note, written in child's handwriting. It was supposed to be a weekend. The same words Karen Tanner had spoken during her first press conference in 2007, word for word. Investigators froze. Had someone watched the press conference, memorized it, or had Matthew somehow heard her from wherever he was? One psychologist, when briefed on the case, offered a terrifying possibility. If he's still alive, and his consciousness has been shaped by that place, he might be absorbing memories from those searching for him. He might not just remember them, he might become them. That theory gained weight when a ranger was found wandering miles off trail, confused and barefoot. He couldn't remember his name, but he kept repeating one phrase, "I know where the room is now." The ranger found wandering off trail was identified as Mason Klein, 42, a veteran with over 15 years of Everglades experience. He had last checked in the night before for a routine sweep of the outer perimeter. When his shift ended, he never returned. No distress signal, no radio call. He simply vanished until he reappeared 18 hours later, barefoot, dehydrated, and visibly shaken. What disturbed investigators wasn't just that he'd gone missing. It was where he'd been found. Over 27 miles from his assigned sector, across waterlogged terrain that couldn't be crossed without a boat. He had no injuries, no cuts or scrapes, not even bug bites. His boots and uniform were never recovered, but his blood pressure was dangerously low, and his pupils remained dilated for 6 hours. When questioned, he gave short, broken answers. "I was in the dark," he said, "but not alone." When pressed further, he became agitated. "It watched me watching it." Then softly, "It was trying my face on." Psychologists dismissed this as dissociative trauma, but one investigator noticed something chilling. Klein's speech patterns, once clipped and blunt, now bore a strange resemblance to Matthew Tanner's childhood journal entries, right down to a repeated phrase, "the quiet place under the water." He was placed under psychiatric evaluation. 3 days later, he disappeared again, this time from a locked hospital room. Security footage showed nothing. The door never opened. The window never moved. The only clue was a phrase smeared in condensation on the glass. "He knows I told you." Back in the swamp, the spiral clearing had changed. New carvings appeared in the trees. This time symbols, not words. Circles within circles. A line through a hand. An eye without a pupil. Experts were brought in to analyze the glyphs. One linguist, Dr. Alana Brooks, noted their similarity to petroglyphs found in ancient flood myths around the globe. "These symbols aren't just warnings," she said. "They're invitations, instructions even." And then something unexplainable happened. A storm swept through the region, brief but violent. Afterward, trail cams near the clearing recorded a new anomaly. A young girl, estimated 8 to 10 years old, walked barefoot through the trees at dusk. She wore a hospital gown. Her hair was wet, as if recently submerged. She carried a journal. Rangers rushed to the location. They found no sign of her, but they did find the journal. Blank, except for one page. On it, a detailed pencil sketch of the spiral clearing. And in the center, drawn in impossible accuracy, was the pool. Beneath it, an underground chamber, rooms branching like a honeycomb, figures in each one, some curled up, some standing, and in the deepest room, a boy holding a lantern surrounded by mirrors. Written at the bottom in looping cursive, "They forget who they were when they stop looking." DNA pulled from the journal matched no one in the system, but mud samples on the paper matched the exact mineral signature of the spiral pool, an extremely rare combination of peat, decayed mangrove, and brackish sediment found nowhere else in the park. The girl was never seen again. That week, a former Division 16 analyst came forward anonymously. He claimed to have seen photos the public never would, photos of figures at the edge of infrared scans. They stand still, but they're not statues. They move only when you're not watching. That's the trick. They wait for your gaze to leave. Then they change something. Sometimes it's you. When asked what he believed the spiral pool really was, his answer was short. A mirror that remembers you. One field agent was overheard saying, "We're not just looking for a missing boy anymore. We're chasing something that watches us watch it, and it's learning fast." That night, 2 rangers resigned. One left a final message scrawled in his logbook. "If you stare into the swamp long enough, it starts staring back with your own eyes." By late autumn, the case files surrounding Matthew Tanner had fractured into 3 internal categories: disappearance, manifestation, and mimicry. The last one, mimicry, was new and terrifying. It referred to a growing pattern among those involved in the investigation: changes in behavior, memory gaps, speech shifts. Not just trauma responses, full personality overlays. Agents who'd never met Matthew began having dreams about him. Rangers found themselves humming songs he used to sing. One analyst, brought in to study the glyphs, began writing in a child's handwriting, backwards. When questioned, she claimed she didn't remember doing it. "I must have copied it from the journal," she said. But the journal had been locked in a vault for weeks. Division 16's internal logs show the first use of the term echo patterns, behavioral mirroring, that suggested exposure to the spiral pool or related artifacts triggered something deeper than hallucinations. "We're not just looking at psychological contagion," one memo warned. "We're seeing identity bleed." This came to a head when a senior field agent, Daniel Ross, was found standing waist-deep in the swamp at dawn, unmoving, eyes closed. His radio mic had been keyed open for hours, but he hadn't spoken. When his team pulled him out, he resisted. Not violently, but insistently. "He's not finished yet," he kept repeating. When they checked the audio logs, they found a single whispered sentence recorded just before Ross was found. It wasn't his voice, it was a child's. Calm, measured. "If you take him now, he'll forget who he's supposed to be." Ross was placed on administrative leave. He disappeared 2 days later from a monitored safe house. The only clue, a message drawn on the bathroom mirror with a wet finger. "He showed me the other faces." As the investigation unraveled, new reports poured in from locals and campers who hadn't even been following the case. They described seeing familiar faces in the woods, friends, relatives, even lost pets. But always slightly wrong. A smile held too long, eyes that didn't blink, voices repeating the same phrase in loops. "I remember you." One camper, a high school teacher from Naples, claimed she saw her late brother standing in the trees. He'd drowned in 1998. She hadn't spoken of him in years. "He waved like he used to," she said, "but he didn't blink, and when I didn't move, he whispered, 'Say it back.'" The deeper the agents looked, the more they realized the pool wasn't just a place. It was a threshold, a memory engine, one that absorbed, echoed, and wore the shapes of those who stepped too close, which brought them back to Matthew Tanner, if he was still alive. Was he still only himself, or had 15 years within that room of water transformed him into something else? Karen Tanner, still missing since her escape from the psychiatric facility, became the center of the next anomaly. Trail cams, reactivated by satellite uplink, captured a woman matching her profile, walking near the spiral clearing. She was barefoot, thin, wearing a hospital gown, but she was smiling. In her hands, a child's raincoat, yellow, faded, but whole. Rangers rushed to the site. They found footprints, real ones, human, leading directly to the pool. No signs of dragging, struggle, or panic, just a straight, deliberate path. They also found something else. A second journal. This one bound in leather, not cloth. Inside were pages written in two distinct hands. One, Matthew's childlike script. The other, unmistakably Karen's. The last page read, "He's not trapped. He's choosing to stay, because the silence loves him now." And then, he asked if I wanted to remember or be remembered. I chose the second. The implications sent shockwaves through the team. Whatever Matthew Tanner had become, he was no longer asking for rescue. He was asking for a witness. And the swamp, it was listening. Something had changed in the Everglades. The wildlife knew it first. Birds stopped nesting near the spiral clearing. Gators avoided the pool, where once they basked for warmth. Rangers noticed deer migration patterns shifting unnaturally, as if the animals were circling something they refused to cross. But it wasn't just the wildlife. The swamp itself had taken on a new character. The air near the pool grew heavier, thicker, not just humid, but charged. Compass needles no longer spun. They pointed toward the pool, consistently, like it had become a magnetic heart, drawing everything toward it. Division 16 issued an emergency protocol. No personnel were to enter the spiral clearing alone, and yet someone did. On November 17, 2022, a low-level tech assistant named Julia Bren left her post and walked straight into the swamp. She didn't pack gear. She didn't sign out. She left a single note taped to her screen. "I heard him humming last night. He said it's almost ready." It took search teams 2 days to find her belongings. A backpack placed carefully on a dry patch of ground near the clearing. Inside, her ID, her phone, and a small hand mirror cracked down the center. On the mirror's surface, scrawled in condensation, "Don't look away." Her body was never found. That same week, residents of the small town of Ochapi, just 18 miles from the spiral, began reporting strange dreams. People who had never met each other described the same scene. A boy standing waist-deep in black water, lantern in hand, whispering in a voice that didn't match his face. "It breathes when you sleep," he said, "so don't dream too deep." Dr. Elise Grammer, the folklorist brought in earlier in the case, confirmed that this motif appeared in multiple cultures across millennia. "The idea of a threshold that learns," she explained, "something that becomes stronger through memory and belief. It's not new. What's new is how visible it's become." She believed the pool wasn't just a place. It was becoming an entity, not alive in the way we understand, but aware, sentient through echo, existing through memory. And each time someone entered its orbit, it grew sharper, more defined. "It's like a reflection trying to step out of the mirror," she said. This theory seemed validated when audio from a now-defunct field cam captured something entirely new. Breathing, not human, not animal, but rhythmic, deep, as if the swamp itself had lungs. It pulsed through the trees, rising and falling with the wind, except there was no wind that night. The trees stood still. The sound was layered beneath ambient noise, only detectable through frequency isolation. But when played alone, it triggered strong reactions. One analyst fainted. Another wept uncontrollably. A third claimed she saw her childhood bedroom flash in her mind, though she hadn't lived there in 30 years. This was the tipping point. Division 16 pulled all personnel. The spiral pool was deemed metaphysically unstable. A radius of 1 mile around it was sealed. Satellite imagery of the area was obscured by placeholder cloud patterns. To the public, the zone simply became part of an ecological restoration project. But before the shutdown, one final drone captured footage that never aired. It showed the spiral pool at sunrise. Mist hovered low. Then something rippled beneath the surface, like a massive shape turning in sleep. A figure emerged at the edge. A boy, now older, maybe 16, maybe more, not just a ghost of Matthew Tanner. He looked into the drone, smiled, raised his hand, and behind him, beneath the glassy water, dozens of faces stared up. Some were blurred, others crystal clear. One matched Julia Bren, another Agent Daniel Ross, and in the center, eyes open, was Alan Tanner. The drone froze, footage cut out. The operator claimed the signal was overwhelmed by a tone too low for human hearing. One last frame was recovered. It showed Matthew reaching toward the lens, mouth half open. Captioned in the drone's final metadata tag were 4 words, auto-generated by AI scene detection software. He wants to remember. There's a reason most missing persons cases fade quietly into the background. People vanish, stories go cold, and the world moves on. But the Matthew Tanner case refused to be forgotten. Not because of publicity, not because of conspiracy, but because forgetting became impossible. Reports continued to surface, not from those near the Everglades, but across the country. Individuals from as far as Oregon, Maine, and Arizona began claiming similar experiences. It started with dreams. Always the same. A boy in a yellow raincoat standing in shallow black water holding a lantern. He never spoke, but his mouth moved, and those who saw him said they understood anyway. "He showed me where the door was," said one man, a 57-year-old retired school janitor from Ohio. "He said we've all seen it before, but we forget when we wake up." These weren't attention seekers. Most never went public. They were found by patterns, sleeplessness, internet searches about spiral symbols, obsessive sketching of tree carvings. The most disturbing commonality, all of them had experienced a profound loss. A child, a sibling, a spouse, people on the edge of grief, and now, seemingly, on the edge of something else. One woman, a grief counselor from Vermont, drew a map in her sleep. Her husband found her at 3:12 a.m., sitting upright, eyes closed, scribbling with both hands. The drawing matched the layout of the spiral pool clearing, down to the placement of specific cypress trees, trees she had never seen. When interviewed, she said only this: "I think it's choosing new memories now." Inside Division 16, this was labeled event drift. The theory proposed that the spiral pool and whatever consciousness had grown around it was no longer limited to the Everglades. It had begun replicating its pattern elsewhere, not physically, but mentally, emotionally. Like a virus made of memory or a god born of grief. The final confirmation came from a recording that no one could explain. It arrived via encrypted email, sent to every agent involved in the Tanner case. No sender, no header. The file name, Play This When Alone WAV. It was only 39 seconds long, static at first, then the sound of dripping water, then Matthew's voice, calm, clear, older. "I remember all of you, your names, your faces, the things you lost. I remember how the wind sounded the day you gave up. I remember who you were before you forgot. I'm not stuck. I'm not trapped. I'm remembering everything so you don't have to. You gave it to me, and I kept it. Thank you." Then silence, until one last whisper, barely audible. "But he remembers you, too." Analysts confirmed it was the same voice from the recovered journal tape and the spiral pool footage. The message had no digital origin. It didn't pass through any known server. It simply appeared, as if it had always been there. In the following weeks, multiple members of the original 2007 search team began experiencing blackouts. One ranger awoke on his roof, clutching a Polaroid photo of a swamp he had never visited. Another agent found carvings on the walls of her bedroom, glyphs identical to those at the spiral site. No signs of forced entry, no witnesses. When one former Division 16 operative went missing from his locked apartment in Maryland, they found only a single object in his place: a compass, still spinning. Dr. Elise Grammer, the folklorist, offered a chilling theory. This isn't about finding Matthew anymore. It's about understanding what he's become. Or more accurately, what we turned him into. She argued the spiral pool was a kind of consciousness trap, something ancient that feeds on memory, pain, and attention. And in 2007, Matthew became the seed, the spark, the first stone thrown into its depths. Now, it wasn't just remembering, it was being remembered, which meant it had roots, faces, stories, and it was using them. The last memo from Division 16, before the unit was dissolved, was just one sentence. Close the case. Forget the boy. But across the country, more people were beginning to see him. In windows, in puddles, in dreams. And each time, he came a little closer. In December of 2022, something unexpected happened. A sinkhole opened on the northern edge of the Everglades Preserve, now a heavily restricted zone. It wasn't natural. The hole was circular, exactly 12 feet across, with clean, symmetrical edges, too perfect to be erosion. Rangers responded first, but before they could secure the site, a local wildlife photographer named Tyler Rooks reached it. He'd been obsessed with the Matthew Tanner case, publishing theories online under the alias Wet Signal. Tyler sent one image to his followers before his feed went dark. The photo showed the hole from above. At its center, the unmistakable shape of a spiral carved into the exposed earth, as if something deep beneath had risen to the surface. Tyler hasn't been seen since. When agents arrived at the sinkhole, they found no trace of him. No gear, no footprints. But a note was left behind, scribbled into the dirt with a finger. They sleep beneath us until we call their names. Division 16, reinstated quietly under a new name, locked down the site within hours. Drone scans revealed something beneath the hole. Hollow cavities large enough to stand in, interconnected like rooms, like chambers, just like the drawing found in the girl's journal weeks earlier. A decision was made. They would go in. 3 operatives, 1 linguist. 1 geotechnical engineer, 1 medic. No digital equipment. All notes taken on analog tape recorders and physical media. The descent took 12 minutes. The rope line remained taut. No communication for the first 3. Then static. Then silence. The first transmission came at 18 minutes, 22 seconds. We've reached the floor, walls are soft, breathing, no air current, but it feels like wind, smells like wet stone, can't see the top anymore. The second came later. Found markings, faces, carved into the walls. Some look real, some look unfinished. Then, 41 minutes in, voices, multiple, all speaking at once, different languages, all saying the same word, return. Then nothing. The rope line snapped. When a secondary team arrived, they found no one. No bodies, no gear, no evidence anyone had ever gone down. Except the walls. New carvings, 3 faces, their faces, rendered in grotesque detail, eyes open, mouths closed, and next to them, a child's handprint. The chamber was filled in with concrete within 48 hours. Publicly, the event was labeled an unstable aquifer collapse, but rumors spread fast. And then a pattern emerged. People who had been following the case obsessively began reporting strange experiences, seeing their own faces in reflections they didn't recognize. A boy's laughter behind them in the mirror. A shadow outside their windows that moved even when they didn't. One woman, an ER nurse from Tallahassee, filmed herself staring into her bathroom mirror, visibly shaking. "I keep seeing my daughter," she whispered, "but she's gone. She died last year, and she keeps mouthing something to me over and over. I think it's his name." She was found unresponsive 2 days later. In her home, investigators found carvings behind her dresser, glyphs, a spiral. The words, "You saw him, now he sees you." Digital forums exploded. The case had become folklore, myth, and modern legend. But those closest to it knew better. It wasn't spreading because people believed. It was spreading because people remembered. Dr. Elise Grammer, now in hiding, sent one final voice message to a trusted researcher. "It's not just Matthew anymore. That place, the spiral, it's like a mouth. And the more we tell the story, the more we feed it. Every photo, every search, every dream. She ended with one last warning. The swamp doesn't take people, it remakes them. Into echoes, into watchers, into the next thing someone else will see and never forget. The message cut out with a single word, distorted and low. Listen. The metadata revealed it had been recorded exactly 15 years to the minute after Matthew Tanner disappeared. And at that same moment, trail cams, long dead, snapped back to life. Dozens of them, all across the Everglades. Each one recorded a single frame. The pool, still, and in the center, Matthew, smiling. But now he was holding someone's hand. The hand Matthew was holding in that single trail cam image remained unidentified for days. The figure was blurry, half-cropped, only a partial silhouette, just enough to show an adult build, standing slightly behind him. But for those who had followed the case since the beginning, the implications were immediate. Alan Tanner, his father, missing since the failed expedition into the spiral clearing. Analysts enhanced the image, adjusted contrast, focused on skin tone, posture, even clothing folds. The figure wasn't just similar to Alan, it was him. But something about the proportions felt wrong, shoulders too long, shadow too wide. The reflection in the water beneath them didn't match the image above. Where there should have been two figures, there were three. Experts called it an artifact, glitch in the image data, but others saw something else. A watcher, taller, featureless, hovering just behind them like a secret not ready to speak. And then came the knock. A man appeared at a ranger outpost 12 miles from the spiral zone. He was barefoot, dirty, clothes shredded. He asked for water and help contacting his wife. His name, Alan Tanner. But something wasn't right. He looked like Alan, same face, same voice, but not the same person. He asked questions that made no sense. What year is it? Is Matthew still 10? He didn't recognize modern tech. He panicked when shown his own face in a mirror. When asked where he'd been, he answered, "I walked sideways until the trees turned into hallways." He was detained for evaluation. DNA confirmed the impossible. It was Alan Tanner. No signs of physical trauma. His blood work was normal. But neurologically, he showed signs of induced amnesia. He could recall memories from before 2007, but nothing after. His last clear memory? We were in the tent. Matthew had the frog in his hand. Then I saw something across the water. It had no face, just white. When asked what happened next, he began crying, then stopped suddenly, looked up, and whispered, "I think it's still wearing part of me." That night, all electricity failed in the holding facility. Every camera shut off. When the lights returned, Alan was gone. No alarms, no forced entry. Just a message, carved into the glass of the observation room. He left the rest of him here. The next morning, all footage from Alan's stay had vanished from the servers. Investigators only recovered one frame, corrupted and dim. It showed Alan sitting on the floor of his room, looking directly into the lens. Behind him, in the corner, stood a second Alan, blurred, motionless, smiling. Then came the disappearances, not in the Everglades, but in cities, quiet, unlinked, but with a common thread. People obsessed with the Matthew Tanner case began vanishing from their homes. Their phones left behind, unlocked. In every case, their last Google search was the same: Spiral Pool, Florida, real location. One woman, a librarian from Denver, left behind hundreds of pages printed from online forums, notes in the margins, spiral symbols drawn in every corner. She wrote, "He's not haunting us. He's calling home the ones who already left a long time ago." Soon after, whispers began to circulate about mirror children. Sightings of kids who looked like the missing, but behaved wrong. One family reported seeing their son, gone since 2010, standing in their backyard. He waved, didn't speak. But when the mother opened the door, he was gone. Except he'd left behind a drawing, the spiral pool, and the words, "We're almost ready to open the rest." Authorities denied these claims, called them fabrications, mass hysteria. But Division 16 reopened the spiral site, quietly, without announcement. They lowered a camera rig into the filled-in sinkhole, through concrete they themselves had poured, and found nothing. No chamber, no carvings, no evidence it had ever existed. Only water. Still. Cold. And then, just before the feed cut out, a voice, a child's voice. Not a whisper, not fearful, a declaration. "We remember who you were. Now come remember what you are." In the final days of the investigation, if you can call it that anymore, those closest to the case started speaking in past tense. Not just about Matthew, about themselves, about the world before the spiral pool, the world before the faces started looking back. The last official transmission from the Everglades came from a ranger named Callan Price. Known for being skeptical, grounded, and deeply resistant to anything paranormal, he had refused to take part in most operations. But on January 3rd, 2023, the exact 15-year anniversary of Matthew Tanner's disappearance, Callan walked into the spiral zone alone. No clearance, no radio, just a field notebook and a flashlight. He was last seen by a trail cam, calmly stepping into the same clearing where Matthew once stood. He was humming, "Row, row, row your boat." 2 hours later, his notebook was found, placed at the edge of the water, dry, pristine. The final entry, written in uneven print, said, "If you listen long enough, it lets you in." Below it, a sketch of a door with no knob, a door submerged in water, a door with a reflection that didn't match. After that, everything started unraveling. Reports of echoes began to appear not only in Florida, but across the United States, and then internationally. People describing dreams of rooms underwater, walls that moved like lungs, children they didn't have calling them mom or dad from inside mirrors. One man in Toronto claimed his reflection blinked before he did. A teacher in Oregon drew the spiral symbol on her whiteboard in the middle of class, then didn't remember doing it. Something was moving, something born in the silence of the Everglades, or maybe already waiting for a name, and we gave it one. Matthew. But what if Matthew was just the beginning? In the last known communication from Dr. Elise Grammer, delivered as a voice memo to an encrypted server, she spoke slowly, as if choosing her words with surgical precision. Every culture has a story like this. A boy lost, a forest that keeps secrets, a mirror that looks back. But we gave this one structure. Attention, data, we mapped it, we tracked it, and that's how we made it real. She continued. Matthew was the match, but we were the flame. Then she sighed. Do you want to know the part no one talks about? What happens to the ones who go into the spiral and come back? A pause. They don't remember being inside, but the spiral remembers being them. That message ended abruptly. Her location remains unknown. In the months that followed, 39 people directly connected to the case disappeared. 23 left notes, 12 left drawings, 14 left behind mirrors, each one shattered down the center, and every single one of them was last seen alone. Today, the spiral pool is completely overgrown. Satellite images show nothing but vegetation. No clearing, no water, no trace, but locals still avoid the area, not because they believe in it, but because they remember almost believing in it. And that's enough. Sometimes, late at night, hikers say they hear the sound of something just out of sight, a voice that doesn't echo, a figure that doesn't reflect, and sometimes a child's laughter, faint, familiar, and if you turn toward it, if you let it see you, you might hear one last whisper, Thank you for remembering me. I'll carry you now. And after that, no one remembers what happened next. Not really, but they all draw the same thing, a spiral. And in the center, a boy holding a lantern, smiling, waiting still.